I was to be the future crown princess. Then, a woman who had traveled 1,000 miles in search of her husband stopped my carriage in the middle of the street. She produced the crown prince's personal jade pendant and declared, with a challenging look, that the prince had already married her in a village far from the capital. But she did not know that my betrothal was the emperor's way of demonstrating his grace. The position of crown princess was not one she could ever hold. The crown prince looked stunned when he saw me. After all, trailing behind me was Clara, the very woman who had journeyed so far to find him. Ignoring the strange glances from the surrounding attendants and maids, she darted out from behind me and threw herself into the prince's arms. Her arms wrapped around his waist as she murmured softly, "My husband." In that instant, every eye in the courtyard turned to me. I maintained the utmost dignity befitting a daughter of a noble house, raising a handkerchief to my lips to cover 2 delicate coughs. The sound roused the prince from his shock. He looked down at the woman in his embrace. "Clara, how did you get here?" He trailed off, but the woman in his arms blinked her tear-filled eyes, radiating an air of pitiable fragility. She looked up at him, her eyes instantly reddening. "You told me you were just coming to the capital to find your relatives," she whispered. "Why did you never return? I have suffered so much looking for you." Everyone's attention was fixed on the two of them. I felt like a spectator in my own story, and I too was curious to see how the prince would explain himself. He stammered for a long moment before finally saying, "My situation was uncertain then. I didn't dare tell you the whole truth. I intended to send for you once everything was settled." As soon as he said this, Clara's gaze shot toward me, filled with appraisal, then hostility, and finally, a perfectly measured touch of grievance. She pressed her voice low and said to the prince, "But after I arrived in the capital, everyone said the crown prince is to be wed, that the crown princess will soon preside over the Eastern Palace. If that is so, then what am I?" With that, she let a few perfect tears roll down her cheeks. The prince's heart went out to her. He gently wiped her tears away, consoling her. "Now that you are here, you will stay. As for other matters, we will discuss them later." Clara was clever. Given an opening, she took it, knowing not to push him too far after winning his sympathy. As for the other matters the prince mentioned, I presumed he meant her official title. A maid led Clara toward the rear courtyard. As she passed me, a flicker of defiance lit her eyes, and a faint smile played on her lips. This woman, it seemed, was far from simple. Left alone with the prince, a heavy silence fell between us. I turned and returned to my family's manor. Bad news, however, travels fast. The story of the crown prince having already taken a wife in the countryside spread through the capital like wildfire, becoming the latest amusement for the city's gossips. My engagement to the prince became a laughingstock, and my family, House Atherton, was disgraced. Though there had been no formal imperial decree for their union, he had performed the wedding rites with Clara, and he himself admitted their marriage was valid. Everyone praised Clara's good fortune, a simple fisherman's daughter from the south, who saved a young man from a river and ended up with the noble crown prince as her husband. They called it fate, a meteoric rise to power. Only I was left in an awkward, humiliating position. Everywhere I went, I was met with strange, pitying stares. I had no choice but to refuse all invitations and remain within the walls of our manor. I was waiting for the prince to come to me. When he arrived, I was in the courtyard, trimming the leaves of an orchid. "Has your highness devised a solution?" I asked, looking up at his hurried approach. He seemed to lack his usual composure. "Eleanor, you will be the crown princess," he stated, his eyes filled with a self-satisfied certainty. "Clara will be my consort. Her name entered into the royal family records. This is the greatest concession I can make." His greatest concession, as if granting me the title of crown princess was some grand favor I should be grateful for. "Oh, from wife to consort, will Miss Clara be content with that?" I asked nonchalantly, my attention returning to the orchid. His brow furrowed. "Clara's heart is with me alone. She is not like other women who covet status and power." That last sentence seemed to be aimed at me. Coveting power? Coveting the position of crown princess? She might covet it, but the palace would have to approve first. Since Miss Clara is of such a noble and pure character, she deserves a true gentleman, I said with a light mocking laugh. What a pity, his face darkened. Sharp-tongued as ever. I scoffed, unconcerned. He understood my jab that he was no gentleman, and that it was a pity Clara would be reduced to a mere consort. Clara is a gentle, fragile woman, he continued, his tone turning into a warning. She is peaceful and seeks no conflict. She will not stand in your way. You, on the other hand, have always been proud. If you cannot tolerate her, the palace will know no peace. I came today to remind you that I will not abide by the vile schemes of the women's quarters. So, even before we were married, his heart was already tilted. Then what is to be done? I said, spreading my hands in a gesture of helplessness. I am willful and spoiled. I am certain I will displease your highness often and make things difficult for your dear consort Clara. He became agitated. Do you know nothing of a wife's duties, of obedience and virtue? A wife must obey her husband. He is her guide. How can I tolerate such disrespect? I waved a hand dismissively. We can discuss that on another day. He stormed away, flicking his sleeves in anger. This great manor now housed only my grandmother and me. Me father and brother had both died on the battlefield. Their bodies never returned from the war. This marriage was the emperor's declaration of his favor. The title of crown princess was not something the prince could take from me. He could only offer Clara the position of consort. On the night of the Lantern Festival, I sat in a decorated barge on the river, watching the crown prince escort her through the festivities. He won her prizes at the stalls, and they stood together in the bustling street, a picture of love, their eyes filled with affection. Though the crowds did not know their identities, the handsome couple drew cheers of admiration. The prince, I imagined, had long resented this marriage forced upon him by the emperor. His actions now were a deliberate public humiliation of me. I toyed with my wine cup, then drained several in succession. Stepping off the barge, I walked gracefully to a spot not far from them. The smiles on their faces vanished the moment they saw me, as if my presence had ruined their evening. The prince ignored me, wrapping an arm around her and leading her away. I took a lantern from my maid, descended the stone steps to the riverbank, and knelt. I gently placed the lantern in the water, watching it float away into the darkness. My maid, Rose, stood behind me, indignant on my behalf. My lady, you should not have to endure such neglect. You are not yet married and already the prince acts so brazenly. Once you are, he will surely favor her. Won't she then walk all over you? I rose slowly, my eyes on the distant lantern. A small smile touched my lips. How long can royal affection last? If she relies solely on this fleeting sentiment, she is not worthy of being my rival. When I returned to the manor, I was told my grandmother wished to see me. I entered her chambers to find her resting with her eyes closed, prayer beads moving slowly through her fingers. The rumors of the capital had surely reached her ears. She opened her eyes and asked in a steady voice, "Was the festival lively? Did you enjoy yourself?" I nodded and smiled. The lights were brilliant. It was very festive. "It is good that you can remain composed," she said, her voice gentle and reassuring. Life is not a battle won or lost in a single day. The crown prince, during a trip south, had been the target of an assassination attempt. Clara had saved him, and they had fallen in love, marrying in her village. I could not show weakness. To act the part of a hysterical, scorned woman would only invite more mockery, and that was a role I could never play. I moved to her side. "I understand, grandmother. I know how to handle this." Clara was taken to the palace, where it was said the senior ladies-in-waiting were teaching her court etiquette. Clearly, the empress had sided with the prince. She was likely displeased with my appointment as crown princess as well. House Atherton was in decline. Our standing in the capital now dependent on the emperor's favor, and the memory of past glories. Our future prospects were dim. Me marriage was nothing more than a monument. a symbol for the emperor to show the world he honored the descendants of his loyal retainers. My status offered no political advantage to the prince. In fact, his position was being used to bolster a fading noble house. The empress resented this and saw no harm in using Clara to cause me trouble. I heard that Clara was a quick study, earning praise from her tutors, and even from the empress herself. The empress hosted a flower-viewing banquet, an invitation I could not refuse. When I arrived, I saw Clara standing intimately beside the empress. The empress herself plucked a peony and handed it to Clara, praising her for being gentle and well-mannered. She then added that she would feel at ease with such a person serving the prince. The surrounding ladies echoed her praise, casting meaningful glances in my direction. The empress was publicly acknowledging Clara, a clear warning to me. Amid the chorus of flattery, Clara smiled triumphantly, her eyes glinting with provocation. She had become the empress's pawn to curb my pride. I had no desire to join their circle of chatter, so I slipped away down a corridor and sat alone in a corner pavilion. But Clara followed me. She sat down opposite me without invitation. "Do you see the situation clearly now, Lady Eleanor?" she said with a smirk. "This is what you will face if you enter the Eastern Palace." I wondered where she had learned such arrogance. "Even if the Empress and the Prince dislike me, this is the most they can do," I stated calmly. "What you truly want, you will never have." A flicker of resentment crossed her face. "Of course," she snapped, her voice sharp with anger. How could I compare to Lady Eleanor, whose father and brother paid for her position with their lives? "Tell me, when you dream at night, does your heart not ache?" The next sound was her pained gasp as she clutched her face. My hand had already struck her, leaving her stunned and bewildered. I had ignored her previous provocations, but this time, she had crossed a line. I seized her by the throat, pinning her against a pillar, my grip tightening. My father and brother fought and died for this empire. Their sacrifice is not something you have the right to speak of. The title of crown princess you covet so dearly is worthless compared to their lives. Panic flared in her eyes. She had never imagined I would resort to violence within the palace walls. House Atherton is a family of generals. My father and brother were warriors. I may be a woman, unable to ride into battle, but I am not helpless. If you ever speak of them again, this will be more than just a small warning. I released her. She looked as if she was about to scream for help. "You've had your moment in the spotlight for today," I warned again. "If you cause a bigger scene, you will lose more than you gain." She thought better of it and fell silent. I had no desire to linger. I had made my appearance and paid my respects to the Empress. My duty was done. On the carriage ride home, Rose complained, "The royal family is too cruel. The master and the young master died serving the country, and now they bully you because you have no one to support you." I patted her shoulder. Favor fades when people are gone. Who will remember them forever? When the emperor speaks of their sacrifice, it is to show he honors his loyal servants. If we speak of it, we are seen as arrogant, flaunting our contributions. Besides, the emperor arranged this marriage to show his benevolence. He ensures the union takes place, but he does not care if I suffer in the palace. I am merely a tool for him to display his magnanimity to the world. Tears welled in her eyes, but she said no more. Upon returning home, a letter was waiting for me. It was from one of my father's former subordinates. I was out of the capital for 10 days. When I returned, I learned that the Crown Prince had requested to inspect the northern border as a training exercise, and had petitioned to postpone our wedding for 2 years. It was a clear attempt to string me along. To make matters worse, Clara had caused a scene at our manor, so enraging my grandmother that she fainted. A servant found me at the city gates. I rushed back to find Clara just leaving, an air of haughty triumph about her. I knew instantly whose power she was leaning on. Without the Empress's backing, she would never be so bold. She saw me and sneered. "Your father and brother are gone. House Atherton is an empty shell. Once you are married off, all that will be left is an old woman. A fading house, A deserted home, how much longer can you maintain this facade? The Empress and the Prince despise you. Why do you cling so desperately to this engagement? My hands clenched into fists. My voice broke. Just because the Empress and the Prince favor you, does that give you the right to humiliate House Atherton? My father and brother-S bones are buried on a distant mountain. Now, only my grandmother and I are left to support each other. If you want the title of Crown Princess so badly, you can have it. My words trailed off as I burst into tears, my body shaking with sobs. I had turned the blame onto the Empress and the Prince. The Empress wanted to remain hidden in the shadows. That would not be so easy. A crowd of onlookers had gathered at our gate, whispering and pointing, discussing the Empress and the Prince. They connected this scene with the rumors of Clara's origins. The men of House Atherton died in battle, and now the old lady and the young miss are all that is left. To see them bullied like this is heartbreaking. If the royal family is unhappy with the marriage, they should just annul it, not humiliate them. I hear this woman is the prince's darling. She is quite cunning. The Empress is very pleased with her, and the prince dotes on her. She is only so bold because she has powerful people backing her. Gossip could be a blade that cuts me, but it could also be a sword in my hand. The Empress had belittled me and allowed the rumors to spread, hoping I would back down and renounce the engagement myself. But her actions, combined with the prince's, now painted a picture of her persecuting a house with no one left to defend it. Such behavior was enough to alienate the old guard of the court. Tode's gossip was aimed squarely at the crown prince. Clara could not bear the condemnations of the crowd and fled in disgrace. I watched her retreating figure and found it laughable. By showing weakness, I had placed them on a pyre of public opinion. Today's drama was a trap I had set for her. I wasn't afraid of her causing a scene. I was counting on it. After checking on my grandmother, I sent servants to scour the city for the most renowned physicians. The manor was thrown into a state of chaos, and the news spread among the noble houses of the capital. But this time, the whispers were not of ridicule. Censors in the court submitted memorials impeaching the prince for his lack of private virtue, the disorder in his household, and his disregard for propriety. Elder statesmen wrote to the throne, lamenting the mistreatment of a hero's descendants, a chilling precedent for all loyal subjects. The prince was publicly reprimanded by the emperor in the throne room. A stream of imperial gifts arrived at our manor, a gesture of appeasement. The imperial physicians also came. Their diagnosis was that my grandmother had collapsed from extreme anger and required quiet rest. The prince himself came to our door, bearing lavish tonics and accompanied by Clara. Neither of them looked pleased. This was, after all, a forced apology. It was a visit they had no choice but to make. Attendants followed them, carrying boxes of rare medicinal herbs. The prince cleared his throat. Is the matriarch feeling any better? I have come to see her. I gestured, and a maid led him toward my grandmother's chambers. He was here under the emperor's pressure, simply putting on a show. I didn't need to listen to their empty pleasantries. He had an attendant present me with a brocade box. Inside was a jade pendant carved with a Lewin bird. It was a unique piece, crafted by the imperial artisans, and bestowed only upon the crown princess, a symbol of her supreme status. But my mind went to the white nephrite jade pendant. Clara had shown me that first day his personal seal. The two pendants made his true feelings clear. The prince gazed at the Lewin pendant. Our wedding will not be postponed, he said in a low voice. The Ministry of Rights has chosen a date for next month. Clara has also agreed to accept the position of consort. From now on, I expect you both to live in harmony. It will be for the good of the Eastern Palace. Agreed to accept, as if the position was hers to give away. It seemed that even after all this turmoil, the prince still didn't understand. He believed that simply allowing me to enter the Eastern Palace was a monumental gift. The emperor had confined him to his residence, rejecting his request to inspect the border and delay the wedding. The entire court knew it. Even this visit was made under imperial duress. And yet, he still thought that having a wife and a consort living peacefully together would solve all his problems. My eyes hardened. Your Highness should keep this until after the wedding. Seeing that I would not accept it, he grew annoyed. Clara was upset and caused a scene. It is true, he hissed, but my father has scolded me and punished her. House Atherton has received its gifts and its honor has been restored. What more do you want? If you push too far, you will end up with nothing. His voice was laced with impatience. If your Highness has come to make peace, then you should adopt a peaceful attitude. I retorted coldly. My sharp tone seemed to bring him back to his senses, and he softened his demeanor slightly. He went back to make more small talk with my grandmother. I left the room and found Clara standing by the pond in the courtyard. She wouldn't dare enter my grandmother's chambers now. Forced to come here today, she maintained a submissive posture, but I could see the defiance still burning in her eyes. I heard that the Empress Dowager's most trusted matron had been sent to the Eastern Palace for a month to instruct Clara. She had likely experienced the more torturous side of palace discipline. Her face was pale, her gaze distant. But that wasn't enough. I had one more piece of shocking news for her. You look very much like someone, I began. The wife of the Minister of Justice. Her lips trembled, her eyes wide with shock. She stared at me in panic. What did you say? I repeated myself. You bear a striking resemblance to the Minister of Justice's wife. The prince looks at you and sees another woman, one he could never have, one he lost. Impossible, she whispered, stumbling backward, her eyes filled with terror. Ray knew what she feared. Her entire existence depended on the prince. The minor punishments of the palace could cause her physical pain, but they couldn't shake her foundation. Only the prince's affection was something she could not afford to lose. If all their shared moments were a lie, if his gentle gazes were meant for another, how could she go on? This was a truth she would have to face. You can see for yourself. Look upon the lady's face, then compare it to the portrait hidden in the Eastern Palace's library. You will find your answer. 3 years ago, I had accidentally entered the library and seen that portrait. It was then that I understood the prince's secret desires. The moment Clara had stopped my carriage, the moment I saw her face clearly, I knew. Clara stood frozen, her face as white as a sheet. Even when the prince emerged, she remained lost in a daze, following him mechanically. As they left, I saw the ornate imperial carriage waiting for them outside, a magnificent and eye-catching display. The surrounding commoners were all murmuring about it. What a grand spectacle. The prince had made such a public display of his visit for one reason, to ensure the emperor and the people saw his gesture of reconciliation, hoping to quell the rumors. I watched him help Clara into the carriage before it departed with great fanfare. He truly was thorough in his theatrics. Returning inside, I sat by my grandmother's bedside. She leaned against her pillows, her prayer beads turning slowly. You handled this matter very well, she said quietly. You taught me when I was young, grandmother, I replied. Even if House Atherton is left with only women, we must never allow ourselves to be bullied. I have always remembered. When the servant found me at the city gates that day, his words had been a subtle hint. I guessed my grandmother's plan and played my part, deliberately escalating the situation while feigning weakness. I used the voices of the people to amplify the scandal. The story they saw was this. The Empress and the Prince, displeased with me, used Clara to storm my home, humiliate a defenseless house, and force an annulment. My grandmother fainted from rage, and I, helpless and alone, was forced to relinquish my position. My grandmother's collapse and my public tears were enough to change the direction of the rumors. The narrative became one of the royal family breaking their promise, mistreating the descendants of a national hero, and allowing another to trample on our dignity. Years ago, my father and brother had defended Qingyang Pass to their last breath. Never retreating, never surrendering. The snows that buried the city also buried their bones. After that, only my grandmother and I remained. When the news reached the capital, the emperor, to display his grace, bestowed this marriage upon me. But times change and people forget. No one spoke of the perils of the Qingyang battle anymore, nor did they remember my family's sacrifice. They only saw a house with no heirs, a fading name. They thought I was no longer worthy of the prince. In the Empress's eyes, the capital was full of highborn ladies who could better aid the prince and secure his position. But the emperor had used his son's marriage to display his benevolence, using the glory of the Eastern Palace to brighten our fading house. The empress had intended to humiliate my grandmother and me in private, forcing me to retreat gracefully. But events had spiraled beyond her control. She had praised Clara and shown her favor only to fuel her arrogance, using her as a weapon against me. She never had any intention of giving Clara the title of crown princess. As for the princess village wedding, the empress considered it a farce, not even worth mentioning yet. She gave Clara hope, allowing her to nurture an ambition she should never have had, turning her into a disposable tool. Me grandmother patted my hand, her eyes full of worry. There is little more this old woman can do for you, but the prince is not a good man. I know, I said. Which is why this game is not over. My grandmother seemed to understand my meaning. The prince believed that today marked a truce, that his life of a harmonious wife and consort was about to begin. But this was not the end. It was only the beginning. Back in my courtyard, Rose brought me hot teas. I sipped it. She started again. For the prince to bring that temptress with him, he clearly has no respect for you, my lady. He favors her completely. How will you survive after you are married? The empress is on her side too. If you are wronged, no one will speak for you. Trapped in the Eastern Palace, you will be at their mercy. Hearing her familiar refrain, I asked, "Then what do you suggest I do?" "You must use this situation to your advantage," she urged. "Why do you ask such a thing?" "Good. If my kindness is so great, then it is time for you to repay it. I wish to meet your master." My voice was calm, but the smile vanished from her face. Panic flashed in her eyes, though she tried to feign ignorance. "Is my lady joking? I despise traitors. Yet I have tolerated you for this long," I said, a humorless smile on my face. "Must you wait until a blade is at your throat to know if I am joking?" She fell to her knees with a thud. "Forgive me, my lady. Go." As twilight fell, she hurried out of the manor. I stood with my hands behind my back, watching her go. The next morning, she was kneeling before me. "My master has agreed to meet you today." We rode in a carriage together. Once outside the city gates, she covered my eyes with a silk scarf. When we arrived, she led me by the hand into a residence, through what felt like a maze of corridors, and into a courtyard. When she removed the scarf, I looked at the man before me without a hint of surprise. "Your Highness, Prince Julian." Just as I expected. I looked up. He was dressed in a black robe embroidered with silver clouds, a display of understated luxury. He sat on a raised platform, watching me with a look of casual indifference that was quickly replaced by surprise. "Rose told me you had a sharp mind, that she could not sway your thoughts. But I never imagined you were clever enough to deduce my existence." "I not only deduced your existence, Your Highness, but I also deduced that Clara has a pawn just like Rose by her side, one who feeds her ambitions and guides her actions, turning her into a tool for your plans." My gaze was direct, my tone certain. This was not a guess. The dismissive look on his face faded, replaced by a slow smile. "You are correct. She is but a fisherman's daughter. Without my guidance and support, how could she have ever found the prince? How could she have developed the ambition to become the mistress of the Eastern Palace? A pity she will never realize it. But you, since you have seen through my scheme, why do you insist on meeting me? What is it that you want?" He had placed pawns by both our sides, using them to manipulate us. His invisible hand had been in this game from the start, setting Clara and me against each other, fanning the flames until the conflict drew in other powers. His reach had extended to House Atherton, to me, long ago. He had planted his pieces early, simply because I was the future crown princess. Clara had saved the prince only a year ago. Everything that followed was part of his intricate design. I smiled faintly. "Your Highness asks what I want. Are you concerned I will ruin your plans?" His eyes narrowed, his expression unreadable. "You need not worry, Your Highness," I said clearly. "I see this game for what it is, but I have no desire to end it. I came to meet the player, not as a pawn to be moved, but as an ally. He finally looked at me properly, raising an eyebrow. You want my help? I met his gaze, my posture radiating confidence. No, Your Highness, you are mistaken. It is I who am helping you. His earlier nonchalance was gone, replaced by astonishment. What did you say? Your Highness wants a new master for the Eastern Palace, and I am willing to lend my strength to your cause. He remained silent, hesitating. I pressed on. Your Highness had Rose constantly provoking me, hoping I would annul the engagement in a spectacular fashion. Correct? To damage the Crown Princess' reputation and make him lose favor with the court and the people. I know your plan, and I am happy to help you achieve it. His eyes were now wide with disbelief. I returned to the manor and went to see my grandmother. By evening, news had spread throughout the capital. Matriarch Atherton's condition had worsened. The reason, according to the street-side storytellers, was that the Crown Prince had brought Clara with him on his visit, their inseparable closeness being another blow to the old woman's fragile health. The tea-houses and taverns buzzed with talk of it. I remained at home, listening to the storm rage outside while I tended to my flowers. Finally, Rose reported. The rumors in the city now say the prince brought Clara intentionally to humiliate House Atherton, to force your hand. The people are outraged on your behalf. I set down my shears. The time was right. My grandmother, dressed in her formal robes of state, went to the palace. She knelt before the Hall of Supreme Harmony, proclaiming that House Atherton was of humble fortune and unworthy of a royal match. She begged the emperor to rescind his decree and choose a more suitable bride for the crown prince. I followed her to the palace and knelt behind her. Courtiers, officials, and members of the royal family all witnessed the scene. The two of us, grandmother and granddaughter, prostrated at the bottom of the long, white marble steps. We were all that remained of House Atherton. They remembered the house's past glory and military renown, and now they saw us, two women clinging to each other, facing public humiliation. Many who passed by sighed softly, a sound of sympathy and regret. Finally, the emperor issued a decree, granting our request. He also bestowed upon us a fortune in gold and vast tracts of fertile land. The scandal had grown too large to let it continue, would make the entire imperial family a public joke. By requesting the annulment ourselves, we had given the emperor the perfect way out. I helped my grandmother up. As we walked down the palace corridors, I looked up at the jade-green tiles and vermilion walls and felt suffocated. The wide world outside the palace was where one could truly breathe. Inside the carriage, I drew the curtain closed and leaned against my grandmother. The empress and the prince wanted me to renounce the engagement, I whispered. But they never imagined it would happen like this. They wanted me to suffer in silence, to swallow my pride and step aside quietly with minimal fuss, not to detonate a scandal that the entire world now knew of. My grandmother took my hand. The men of House Atherton had fire in their blood, she said firmly. The women of our house are not meant for silent submission. After today, the crown prince's reputation would be in tatters. The emperor issued another decree, ordering the prince to remain in his residence for half a year to reflect on his actions, excusing him from court duties. It was confinement in all but name. I gradually faded from public view. The emperor's gifts were a clear sign of appeasement, an attempt to calm the waters. My presence would only keep the rumors swirling, something he did not want. I decided to leave the capital to inspect our country estates and reside in our villa there for a while, to escape the political climate. As I was leaving, I saw Prince Julian at the city gates. Our eyes met for a brief moment before we went our separate ways. I took a retinue of guards and stewards with me to the estates. My days were filled with ledgers and administrative tasks. The time passed quickly. A year went by. I heard that during the Crown Prince's confinement, Prince Julian had risen to prominence. The emperor had entrusted him with great responsibilities, including command of the Capital Guard. He proposed several successful national policies, earning praise from the entire court. When the Crown Prince's confinement ended, his influence had greatly diminished. He was overshadowed by Prince Julian at every turn. The emperor was displeased with him, and the court whispered that his past actions proved he lacked the virtue of a future ruler. At the same time, according to the story, a drunken guest stumbled into the library and knocked over a candelabra. In the rush to save the building, its contents were moved outside, and the portrait was exposed for all to see. It was painted by the prince himself. He claimed it was a portrait of Clara, but a courtier pointed out the date on the scroll. It was painted several years ago, long before the prince had ever met Clara. The woman in the painting was not Clara. It was Lady Annelise, the wife of the Minister of Justice. Lady Annelise was the daughter of a count and had grown up in the palace. She and the prince were childhood friends, but her swift marriage to the minister had been arranged by the empress. Now it was clear. She was the prince's unobtainable first love, the moonlight in his heart. His marriage to Clara in the south was likely an attempt to recapture a lost dream. All his affection for Clara was probably just a reflection of his feelings for Annelise. This old palace secret was brought to light, undoubtedly by Prince Julian. Following this, numerous elder statesmen submitted memorials, declaring the prince unfit to rule and demanding he be deposed in favor of a more virtuous heir. The chorus of agreement was deafening. The prince's position was precarious. Everyone assumed a great shift in power was imminent, that Prince Julian's time had come. But a few days later, General Keane, a high-ranking military commander, returned to the capital. He spoke in the prince's defense multiple times, and the calls for his deposal slowly died down. General Keane was the crown prince's maternal uncle, the head of the empress's family. Half a month later, an esteemed guest arrived at my estate. It was Prince Julian. This time he had come to me. I sat in the seat of honor. "Your Highness, it has been a while," I said, gesturing for a maid to serve him tea. He was dressed as opulently as ever, but there was a new agitation about him, a stark contrast to his usual calm. "You seem to have guessed that I would come," he said, his eyes studying me. "Naturally," I smiled. "I did say I would lend you my strength. To remove the heir, I must first remove his foundation house, Keane," he said, his voice laced with ferocity. I rose and stood beside him. "Then let us remove that stumbling block," I said, my voice steady. He seemed taken aback by my ambition and audacity. He looked down. "The evidence I have is not enough to bring them down." I looked him straight in the eye. "My father and brother died at Qingyang Pass because of General Keane's schemes," I said, my voice ringing with conviction. "He delayed reinforcements, conspired for personal gain, sacrificed loyal men, and claimed all the glory, embezzlement of military funds, replacing quality supplies with shoddy ones, his sons seizing land and causing deaths. Are these crimes not enough?" Prince Julian stared at me, his face a mask of shock. My grudge against the prince was not just about a broken engagement. It was a blood feud with his mother's family. Prince Julian stayed for only half a day before hurrying back to the capital. Just as the crown prince thought his position was secure, the capital was plunged into chaos once more. General Keane was accused of embezzling military funds and supplying substandard equipment. His sons were accused of seizing private land and murdering those who resisted. These were the opening shots fired by Prince Julian. At first, House Keane dismissed the accusations, confident they could weather the storm. But then, my grandmother and I beat the drum of grievances outside the palace gates, and everything changed. We knelt before the palace, and I held up a written accusation, my voice shouting the truth of the Battle of Qingyang Pass. General Keane had deliberately delayed reinforcements, leading to the deaths of my father and brother. I demanded justice. I shouted it again and again until a crowd of citizens gathered behind us, their shock turning to outrage. The palace gates opened, and the emperor's personal eunuch summoned us inside. I knelt in the magnificent throne room, facing the entire court without a shred of fear. General Keane glared at me, his eyes radiating menace, and accused me of slander, a grave crime. His threats only made me stand taller. Some debts, no matter how old, must be paid. "I beg your majesty to grant justice for my father and brother," I declared, my voice clear. They met the enemy head-on and fought them to a standstill at Qingyang Pass, vowing to defend the city to the death. General Qin, leading the relief force, was deliberately slow to arrive. He used my family's army to wear down the enemy. By the time my father and brother fell, the enemy was exhausted. General Qin then swept in with his fresh troops for an easy victory and claimed all the credit. The world praises my father and brother for their loyalty and bravery, but they do not know it was a sacrifice that could have been avoided. Lies, utter nonsense, he roared. A blizzard blocked our path. We were not deliberately delayed. I have a witness, I announced. The lieutenant my father sent to plead for aid is still alive. A murmur went through the court. The emperor raised a hand. Bring him in. When the man entered the hall, the color drained from General Qin's face. The man knelt. Your Majesty, the Marquis and his son fought bravely at Qingyang Pass, while waiting for reinforcements that never came. The Marquis ordered me to lead a small detachment to General Qin's position to beg for help, but the general refused to move. He ordered his army to stand down and then ordered my execution. I fought my way free and fell from a cliff, miraculously surviving. When I awoke, I learned that House Atherton's heroes were dead, and General Qin was being hailed as a victor. I have lived in hiding for over a decade for this one day, to reveal the truth. I beg your Majesty to punish this villain and restore justice to House Atherton. The Emperor's face was dark with fury, but I wasn't finished. Your Majesty, I also have physical evidence. A letter, written in General Qin's own hand and bearing his personal seal, ordering the governor of a nearby city not to send aid to Qingyang Pass. He had not only held his own troops back but cut off all other potential sources of help. When the Emperor read the letter, his rage was absolute. General Qin, he thundered. What do you have to say for yourself? The entire court fell to their knees. Guards seize him. The evidence was irrefutable. General Qin was arrested on the spot. Leaving the palace, my grandmother leaned heavily on me. In the carriage, tears streamed down her face. You did it, she whispered, her voice filled with relief. You avenged them. An imperial edict arrived soon after, posthumously honoring my father and brother. I knelt in the Atherton family shrine, tears finally falling. Father, brother, I choked out. If your spirits can see this, know that I have avenged you. For over a decade, this weight has been on my heart. Today, it is finally lifted. When I walked out of the shrine, I felt a lightness I hadn't known in years. House Qin was imprisoned, their trial swift. They confessed to their crimes and were sentenced to execution. The Crown Prince and the Empress were placed under house arrest, guarded by heavy troops. I ascended to the highest floor of the city's central tower and looked out over the capital. A new storm was brewing. A new era was about to begin. Prince Julian appeared beside me, silent as a shadow. He was beaming, radiating success. We are allies on the same path, he said. You have helped me come this far, and what I desire is within my grasp. What about you? What is it that you want? When I hold power, I can offer you the position of royal consort, or even empress. Either will secure your honor and the future of House Atherton. Your Highness and I are indeed alike, weighing every option, thinking rationally, but what I want is none of those things. He looked at me, shocked. He had offered what the world would consider the ultimate prize. I was the last of my line. For a woman, the only way to restore a family's glory was through marriage. He had made a sincere offer, a place at the very peak of the empire. But it was not what I wanted. As he watched me, confused, I knelt before him. For my service in helping you ascend the throne, I ask that you one day defy all opposition, break with tradition, and allow a woman to inherit her family's title. He froze, standing silently for a long time. Finally, Very well, he said. Months later, the crown prince was formally deposed. The empress took her own life. Prince Julian was named the new crown prince. The deposed prince was exiled to a remote villa. One night, the villa went up in flames, the fire visible for miles. Everyone assumed he had perished. He had been a man of no great talent, made crown prince only by birthright. He was never worthy of the title. The reigning emperor, worn down by illness and the recent turmoil, soon fell gravely ill and passed away. The new emperor ascended the throne and declared a general amnesty. True to his word, he stood against the opposition of the entire court and issued a decree: I would inherit the title of Marquis Atherton. When I went to the palace to offer my thanks, he was seated on the throne, already possessing the dignified air of a young ruler. Allowing a woman to inherit a noble title shattered centuries of tradition, and would have faced immense resistance. I had known long ago that only a service as great as helping him secure the throne would be enough to make him fight that battle for me. The world believed that with no male heirs, the Atherton title would be reclaimed by the crown. But I was determined to defy the world, to take the title as a woman and restore my house to greatness. He stood on the battlements of the palace, looking out over his empire. I stood behind him. I offered you the position of empress, he said softly. That would have brought glory to your house as well. Why did you refuse? The path you have chosen will be far more difficult than the one I offered. I looked at him and bowed my head slightly. A bold question. Your Majesty, if I may. If I entered the palace, could you promise to always trust me, to never doubt me? Could you promise to keep the palace empty, to have eyes for only one? He seemed surprised by my directness. His expression clouded over for a moment, then his resolve hardened. No, he said. I would never let any woman jeopardize the stability of my empire. I will take consorts to balance the court and produce heirs, to ensure the prosperity of this nation for generations to come. It was the answer I expected. To be mother of the empire or the favored one of the emperor is the dream of most women, I replied, my own voice just as firm. But it is not my dream. Since I was a child, I have carried the burden of restoring my house. I want House Atherton to be strong and prosperous for 100 years, not to be known as the fading family of an imperial in-law. A look of understanding. Then admiration dawned in his eyes. He smiled faintly. I thought the throne of an empress was the highest honor a woman could aspire to. I see your ambitions are far greater. It was the same look he'd given me that day in the country. Your Majesty and I are alike. We are ruthlessly pragmatic. A wise ruler and a loyal subject. That is the best relationship for us. Your ambition is the empire, and you will achieve it. My ambition is to fulfill my father and brother's legacy and bring glory to my house. You will have your consorts to balance your court and continue your line. And I will find a young man whose heart is entirely mine, and he will marry into my house. Together, we will rebuild House Atherton. I may be a woman, but I will not be outdone by any man. My house will have a glorious future. He listened, a wistful look on his face. Very well, he said after a long pause. You have the same spirit my mother had in her youth. A pity her ambitions could not overcome the height of the palace walls. She would be happy to know you are free to soar in the vast world. Thank you for making this possible, Your Majesty. I will do everything in my power to serve you. I bowed deeply. From this day forward, we were emperor and subject. After leaving the palace, my carriage moved slowly through the streets. Suddenly, I heard a familiar voice. Please, have mercy. I haven't eaten in days. Please, I drew back the curtain. A woman with tangled hair and clothes caked in mud was begging on the street. Her face was so dirty I couldn't make out her features, but I recognized the voice. It was Clara. She hadn't died in the fire. She had escaped in the chaos, only to become a beggar. The image of her stopping my carriage flashed in my mind, a memory from another lifetime. I stepped down from the carriage. The moment she saw me, she tried to flee. My guards stopped her. She fell to her knees and clutched the hem of my dress, her voice trembling with fear. I was wrong. Please, let me go. I was used. The prince only saw me as a substitute. Now I've fallen this far. I know I was wrong. All this wealth and power, it was never for me. I don't understand these schemes. I just want to go back to my little southern town, the one that smells of osmanthus flowers. I just want to be a simple fisherman's daughter again. I gestured, and a guard placed a purse of coins beside her. "There is enough silver here to get you home." She looked up, stunned, then burst into tears of regret. "Thank you," she sobbed. "If I could do it all over again, I would never have set foot in this city." All of that was in the past. I returned to the manor. The new year was approaching. The house was decorated with lanterns and festive banners. I brought in several cheerful new maids, and the halls filled with laughter and life. On New Year's Eve, snow began to fall. My grandmother and I stayed up to welcome the new year, sitting by the hearth with warm wine. "The shadows over House Atherton have lifted," my grandmother said with a smile. "From now on, may every year be fortunate, and may every year bring peace." We sipped our wine as the fire roared, warming the room. I smiled back at her. "May every year be fortunate, and may every year bring peace." Just then, the sound of firecrackers erupted outside, chasing away the old year and welcoming the new. The servants were celebrating in the courtyard, their joyous laughter echoing through the snowy night.